And it's in his holy name that we pray. Amen. Okay, on this particular one, we're in chapter 14, looking at 14 and 15. Not sure how much we'll get on either one of those. I've got some notes that I've done, and I have taught Revelation before, but it has been a long time ago since I did that. But one of the first things that we see in this chapter is the 144,000 again. Where did we see them before? You remember? Chapter 14, verse 3. Okay, and this is another area a lot of times with premillennialists that look at these 144,000. This one is a little bit different in some of the things that it discusses in this. But in chapter 14, not 14, I'm sorry. In chapter 7, it's the seal of Israel. And that's when we begin to see 144,000 of the tribes of the children of Israel were sealed. And that's in chapter 7 and verse 4. And we talked about this a little bit back during that time, that 144,000, there's a lot of misunderstanding, especially in the premillennial school of thought about this 144,000. One book that I read said that the 144,000 are the ones who are going to be saved and go to heaven. Everybody else is still, this is one of these that, you know, if you say you believe in God, you're going to be saved anyway. So everybody else is going to be off on some planet that they are ruling over. And the 144,000 are the ones who will take the healing leaves that is spoken of out to the nations. And so that's their job, is flying back and forth, I guess, to these planets and things like that. That's just an example of how far-fetched some of these things can be. So the 144,000 that we looked at in chapter 7, notice that it said of the different tribes of Israel, these were sealed, okay? This is not the physical Israel, and it's not all the 12 tribes. There's 2 tribes that's missing in that one particular one in chapter 7. And both Dan and Ephraim are missing in that list. No reason to understand it. We don't really know why they're not listed. But there's 12 tribes listed, but without them. So how do they get 12 out of it? Okay. Levi and Manasseh and Ephraim. Okay. But Levi is generally not listed with the 12 because they didn't have land as far as the 12 tribes that would be used in this kind of way. And so Dan and Ephraim are left out. Ephraim being, of course, one of the sons of Joseph from the time when he was in Egypt. And so we go back now to verse 14, and I'm going to do a little bit of reading in this just for the fact that I wasn't prepared, so I want to just refresh my memory again from reading this just to make sure. So I want everybody to read along with me, beginning with verse 1. He says, "Then I looked, and behold, a Lamb standing on Mount Zion, and with him were 144,000, having his Father's name written on their foreheads. And I heard a voice from heaven like the voice of many waters and like the voice of loud thunder. And I heard the sound of harpists playing their harps. They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne, before the 4 living creatures and the elders. And no one could learn the song except the 144,000 who were redeemed from the earth. These are the ones who were not defiled with women, for they were virgins. These are the ones who follow the Lamb wherever he goes. These were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God, to the Lamb, and in their mouth was found no deceit, for they are without fault before the throne of God. And so now there's some issues with going back to chapter 7 and looking at the 144,000. These are all virgins. Okay, so apparently male virgins, Jewish virgins that are the ones that are redeemed from earth. And again, the misunderstanding of that 144,000 can take you in all different kinds of place. What he's looking at are those who've been sealed, who've been redeemed. It's not a physical 144,000. It's a number, 144. What thousand? What's that number? Where's that come from? It's a multiple of 12. And 12 is another complete number. He's showing the completeness of the people that will be saved. There's not a specific number that's there. And then again, he said, except the 144,000 who are redeemed from earth, these are the ones not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Does that mean that any of us who are married that have kids are not going to be of the chosen? Well, no, of course not. You know, and so again, when we look at that, we have to look at it as the redeemed is the key word, I think, in this particular passage. Beverly?
I think it's talking about referring to the idolatry of Israel, of these people, because he compares that to fornication. He compares it to adultery.
Okay.
In Israel. So that's, I don't know, that kind of makes sense to me. That's not talking about literal virgins.
Yeah.
Some people who have not defiled themselves with idolatry.
Okay. And I don't know if y'all heard what she says, talking about they hadn't defiled themselves with idolatry. Okay, they haven't defiled themselves with adultery. Those kind of things. So the idolatry is one of the big issues. What happens when and for example, the prophet Hosea, and he married a young lady named Gomer who was a harlot. And she continued to be a prostitute and even left and still was unfaithful. He was talking about the adultery, the spiritual adultery of Israel at that time. And so that would make sense on this one too, that it's still the same thing. These are people who have not given in. Keep in mind, again, and it's hard to remember sometimes when we get into this different aspects like this, of who this letter is written to and what the purpose behind it is. And I read one the other day I know here's the explanation, complete explanation of Revelation, and that is God wins. And that's what he's trying to get across. And so and remember too that it's apocalyptic in nature, so there's a lot of symbolism and things like that. So again, when you go back, and I think you still have to tie this back in to the earlier 144,000 because they were the redeemed. And now he's talking about these are the four who were redeemed from earth. And again, when we begin to look at this, and when we get this idea sometimes with earth there might be another version that has something else instead of saying earth in that. I'm not really sure. But the idea is, again, these were redeemed from among men, being first fruits to God. Okay? They were faithful to God. They did what God expected them to do. Robert?
I was going to say, I don't know, but I'm just going to interject that it seems kind of fitting, the beatitude of blessed.
I got to come back here. Yeah, okay.
I said, I don't know, and I'm just going to inject this thought. go back to the Beatitudes and talk about blessed are the pure of heart. That's what
Yeah.
I think about when you
Okay.
explain it.
Okay, so tying it back into the Beatitudes, which makes sense. You know, again, there's a lot that's talking about these people who are blessed are the people that do these things. And that's exactly what I think he's referring to right here. Those who are being the first fruits of God, they've been redeemed from the earth. In their mouth was found no deceit, for they were without fault before the throne of God. Now, are any of us going to be without fault before the throne of God? No. It would be nice if we could, but that's not going to happen. Because of the blood of Christ, then we can stand before Him, before God, if we've been faithful to Him, without fault. It's not us that did it, but it's the blood of Christ that redeemed us, and through His blood. So again, I think what he's getting at in this particular part is this 144,000. Just keep in mind, at least in my mind, and what I believe this is mostly talking about, is that we need to understand these are those that have been redeemed. Hey, I do want to mention one thing that Josh has in his information on lesson 9, on the first page, second paragraph, and it looks like the second sentence of that second paragraph. This message was of the need to fear God and worship Him because our judgment had come. That's what we have to do. We need to fear God and worship Him. That's what we do if we're going to be among the 144,000, those that are going to be redeemed from earth at that period point in time. Any other comments? Welcome, Denny. Okay. All right. Now, there's the next part of this is, and that is the proclamation of the three angels. Okay. Seen a lot of angels in the book of Revelation that's going on, and then I'm going to start with verse 6. Then I saw another angel flying in the midst of heaven, having the everlasting gospel to preach to those who dwell on earth, to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people, saying with a loud voice, fear God and give glory to Him, for the hour of His judgment has come, which you just read a little bit about that from here. And springs of water. And another angel followed, saying, Babylon is fallen, that great city, because she has made all nations drink of the wine of the wrath of her fornication. Then a third angel followed them, saying with a loud voice, if anyone worships the beast in his image, and receive his mark on his forehead or on his hand, he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God, which is poured out full strength into the cup of his indignation. He shall be tormented with fire and brimstone in the presence of the holy angels and in the presence of the Lamb, and the smoke of the torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast and his image, and whoever receives the mark of his name. Here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and faith of Jesus. Then I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on, yes, as the Spirit, that they may rest from their labors and their works follow after them. Now, when we get to the point where he's talking about an angel that's having the everlasting gospel preached to those who dwell on earth, is that tied into the church? Is that tied into Christians? Who is it that's got the responsibility to preach the gospel? Isn't it the church? And the church, of course, is made up of individuals who have obeyed the gospel. A lot of times people have a misunderstanding. I think Christians have misunderstandings too sometimes of the church, what the church really is. I hear people when they get upset and they leave a congregation or something, they said, well, the church hurt me. No, the church does not hurt anybody, okay? There's no such thing as church hurt. Now, Christians, on the other hand, do they hurt people? Definitely. Whether they mean to or not, sometimes with things that are said, they are hurt. And because of insensitivity or whatever it may be. And generally when somebody leaves a church, it's not because the church hurt them, it's because the imperfect people that make up the church, which is all of us, then we are the ones that are responsible for that, not the church. And so the church responsibility as a whole, though, is to spread the gospel. And it puts it here, the everlasting gospel. It's the only gospel there is to spread, regardless of what other people want to say, what the premillennialists want to say, or whatever. And so, and it's supposed to go to every nation, tribe, tongue, and people. Now, we talked about, I think last week or a couple of weeks ago, where in the Gospels does it talk about the gospel being spread to all nations and all people, all creatures? That's the way it puts it. Remember? Not Matthew. Colossians. It's in Colossians. That and so when we talk about chapter 24 of Matthew and one of the things that he talked about in that chapter and any of the other ones in Luke and Mark 2 that talk about the destruction of Jerusalem, it says before any of that happened, the gospel had to be taken to the whole world. Colossians was written before the destruction of Jerusalem, and it says that all creatures, the gospel has been taken to all creatures. I have to look and see exactly what that passage is, but anyway, it is in Colossians. I know that, and I don't want to spend a whole lot of time looking for it right now. But is what? Somebody have a comment back here?
Well, where it says go into all the world and preach the gospel to every creature, that's Mark
Is what?
16:15. Mark 16:15.
Okay.
But that's just one.
Yeah, that's one of the passages, and that's dealing with the destruction, right? Yeah. But it's in Colossians that mentions that the gospel had been taken to every creature that's on earth. And
It's almost like these three angels are following, they're like the first one, it talks about he had the eternal gospel to preach to all who live on the earth,
okay.
Everybody. And his message was to fear God and give him glory because of his judgment is coming. Then the next one comes along and talks about how Babylon is fallen.
Yeah.
It's almost like the judgment
And
here.
and we'll talk about
That
that.
third one is another admonition that anyone that worships the beast and his angels,
It's going to
it will be
yeah.
destroyed.
Okay. The passage I'm thinking about is in Colossians chapter 1 and verse 23. If indeed you continue in the faith, grounded and steadfast, and are not moved away from the hope of the gospel which you heard, which was preached to every creature under heaven, of which I, Paul, became a minister. That's a passage I was thinking about, saying that, okay, it has been done. It's been done about the time that this was written. It was done by the destruction of Jerusalem. And so again, it's taken there. And again, keep in mind that what Revelation is talking about, some of it is some things that have already been done. Right? And it's just saying, okay, here's what God's been doing. And when Josh was talking about the very first part of after the seven churches, though, and you get into the angels at that part, talking about Israel, physical Israel at that time. And if that is, again, all that's already been done and everything. So again, I think what he's talking about here is, again, the work that needs to be done to spread the gospel. And then that's where he says, fear God, give him the glory, for the hour of his judgment is come, worship him who made heaven and earth and sea and springs. And then he talks about the next one, saying, Babylon is fallen and Babylon is fallen. Who's Babylon? Okay, probably Rome. So, what does the term Babylon, ever since the days of Nebuchadnezzar, what does the term Babylon mean to God's people? It's what? Okay, idolatry. It could be just anything against God, anything that is against God. Babylon, again, God used Babylon, and Babylon was a very wicked nation. Only lasted about 70 years because, the Persians, Medes and the Persians, of course, took care of all that. But God used Babylon, and ever since that time, Babylon has always been referred to as something that is evil against God. In this particular situation, who's the evil? It's the Roman Caesars, the Roman government. That at this point in time, in the reign of Domitian, is very much across that part of Asia, persecuting the church. Now, Nero's persecution, he also persecuted, but his was controlled primarily to to Rome. And it was primarily geared for him to switch the fault to him of the burning of Rome. And that's why, again, his focus was on Christians because they were a good, easy target. And he was very cruel. He burned them. He used them, their bodies as torches at night and stuff like that, lighting them on fire and all. But again, that was just sort of contained to Rome. Now, in Domitian's time, it's Christians worldwide, at least in the world that they knew at that time. And so the seven churches, what he talks about, they're all under that persecution at some point in time of Domitian, and some of the Caesars that came after that too. But Domitian was one of the worst with the persecutions at that time. And so Babylon, again, has fallen, that great city, because she has made the nations drink the wine of the wrath. So what would that be to these Christians to hear that Babylon, that great city, has fallen? What would that be for them? Wouldn't that be some really good encouragement? It would be a whole lot more encouragement than saying, 2,000 years from now, here's what's going to happen. Y'all just suffer through right now, because I can't tell you anything about that. All I can do is tell you that 2,000 years from now, that when rapture happens and all that, all these things are going to happen. That's ridiculous. He's writing to these people to encourage them. And to say Babylon is fallen, has got to be an encouraging note to them. And they've already been through all of these things, a lot of bad things happening. When we talked about the locusts that had tails like scorpions, when you picture that, it's like, man, I don't want to be there with that, or tails like scorpions. That's not what he's talking about. What he's saying is bad things are happening. And he's still in that same idea. But what he's saying now is Babylon has fallen. What's bringing about all this bad is falling. And then the third angel, as Beverly is talking about now, he talks about anybody then that follows the beast, which is Satan, which at that point in time would have been Rome. Then he himself shall also drink of the wine of the wrath of God that is poured out full strength into this cup of his indignation. And so again, when we look at this whole concept of encouragement for these people, they got to know that, okay, we're serving God. We're having a rough time, no doubt. Some of us are getting killed. Some of us are getting sawn asunder. If you read through chapter 11 of Hebrews, I wouldn't want to be in that situation. But it wasn't just then. That also happened during Old Testament times. What history tells us is that the prophet Isaiah was sown into too. So, I mean, that kind of stuff happened. But right now it's happening because of Rome, and that's where this focus is, not back to the Old Testament times.
Couldn't it also be, though, that he's talking about these people in Rome, certainly, but that it's eternal damnation for them. It's not just
Yeah.
away from them right there.
I-
Because it says the smoke goes up forever and ever, and they have no rest.
Okay, again, eternal damnation. And that, again, Beverly is saying that I think that's exactly what he's talking about because of the terminology that is used. Because it does talk about in the smoke of their torment ascends forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, and worship the beast in his image, and whoever received the mark of his name. There is a push among a lot of people, and when I first heard that Homer Haley had switched over this idea before he died, I was shocked. I didn't think it was true until I bought Homer Haley's book about it and everything. But the view is that the saints, the people who worship God, are going to live forever. But the wicked, they're going to be consumed by fire, and then it's just done. It's over. They're not there anymore. Their souls are destroyed. And it's not an everlasting fire. And when I first read something that said Homer Haley said this, and I said, no, he didn't. Because that's the very opposite he said in his book on Revelation. In the book on Revelation, talking about this passage right here, he talked about the eternal nature of that damnation, of an eternal fire. Then Edward Fudge is the one that has really pushed that a lot, and I watched a little bit about Edward Fudge and his. And Homer Haley, I listened to him too, has the same arguments as Fudge.
That's because there's no partiality with God.
Uh-huh.
There's no middle ground. It's either you're in or you're out. In heaven or in heaven.
Yeah. And those are your two options. Those are the two options. When I was listening to Homer Haley's discussion on this, and I think it's important for you to know because it is becoming more and more prevalent in churches of Christ, that this idea of not eternal damnation, but it's just that your soul, if you're wicked, your soul is just gone. You don't live forever. My thought of, if that were true, why not just live the way you want to? Because you're going to be gone. You're dead like Rover, dead all over. But that's not what he's teaching here. And he says that torment sins forever and ever, and they have no rest day or night, who worship the beast in his image and receive the mark of his name. Now, the next verse, you go back to chapter 13 and see the same concept. Here is the patience of the saints. Okay? In chapter 13 and verse 9, it says, if anyone has an ear, let him hear. He who leads into captivity shall go into captivity. He who kills with the sword must be killed with the sword. Here is the patience and the faith of the saints. Okay, when you look at what he's just said in chapter 13, he's saying that he who goes into captivity, who's killed with the sword, killed with the sword or whatever, here's the patience and the faith of the saints. And that's what we see, I think, too, when we look so many times at some of the, at the last part of Hebrews chapter 11, and some of the things that those people were given. They were given to, you know, they were just abused in all different ways, tortured in all different kinds of ways, and all of that. And here's the patience. And now over here in Revelation 14, he said, and here is the patience of the saints. Here are those who keep the commandments of God and the faith of Jesus. And when I heard a voice from heaven saying to me, right, blessed are the dead who die in the Lord from now on. So what's that mean, die in the Lord from now on? Faithful, right? Faithful to the end. It doesn't necessarily mean that you were killed because of your faith, but it very well could be that you were faithful unto death. Robert?
And in Hebrews 11, and verse 16, it talks about there's a special place for those prior to Christ coming who were faithful.
Uh-huh.
He has a special place prepared for them.
And the encouragement is to be faithful,
Yes.
regardless of what comes our way. And again, you're looking at what Revelation is all about. It's encouraging these people who are going to be dealing with these very issues of torture, being fed to the lions, being fed to the dogs, whatever. Robert?
Because now, you know, we're living in the gospel of Christ.
Uh-huh.
And so this idea of where you talked about where your soul is just dying and be nothing else, but Christ came and he died and sacrificed himself for us so that he can wash us clean and make us pure in the sight of God. That's the only way we can be accepted in purity, holy as he is holy. So we have to be the same way. And the only way we can get that and be that way is through Christ.
Yeah.
And so there's nothing else beyond that, after that, or before that, can separate that.
Uh-huh. And that's true. I mean, you know, that's what we live for. And that whole idea that we see then of the patience of the saints has been able to, I think, handle whatever comes our way with faith. And again, you think about what some of these people are going through. You know, I've often thought, I was talking to Beverly not long ago, and I said, you know, when I watch some of these video clips or something like that, or some of these people that were burned at the stake, okay, and I thought, how do you withstand that? I mean, if I burn my finger, man, everybody knows it. You know, I mean, and I got the blister there, all that stuff and everything, and I'll complain for a week about, you know, my little burnt finger. How do you do that? That is faith, to be able to see them put wood around you and then lighting it on fire while you're tied to a stake. Whether it's, I mean, beheading, to me, I've been just, you're done, okay. But that's, so what happened, and I talked about it the other day in my talk, what happened to Jesus after the prayer in the garden? You remember? Luke's the only one that talks about it. Is what? An angel came and comforted him. Immediately after that prayer, an angel came and comforted him. I believe, and I'd have to believe to go through some things that these people went through, I'd have to believe that somehow or another, God, through an angel or somebody else, is going to help me to get through that kind of torture. I don't know if anybody of y'all have ever read about the bull that they would put people in, and then they'd build a fire underneath it, and it's a brass bull, and as it got hot, well, this person's getting cooked, and the screams would come out of vents in the nose of the cow, so it sounded like the cow, bellowing. But it's the person inside being burned alive, or being barbecued, or whatever you want to call it, that would have happened. You're in something like that, there's got to be some kind of comfort if you're doing that for God. And I believe that's through the angel. And I do believe that if we ever have to face something like that, that we can rely on God to send an angel to comfort us and encourage us to get through those kind of things. Because do you ever read through Fox's Book of Martyrs? If you hadn't, you need to read it sometimes about what these people went through for their belief in God. And some of them were Catholics too at the time when, and again, that's in God's place to judge, not my place to judge. But again, there's the patience of the saints. Can we do that? And he said, patience of those who keep the commandments. Okay, and then the last part, part of this is the reaping of the earth's harvest. Then I looked, behold, a white cloud, and on the cloud was that one like the Son of Man, having on his head a golden crown, in his hand a sharp sickle. Another angel came out to the temple, crying with a loud voice to him who sat on the cloud, thrust in your sickle and reap, for the time has come for you to reap, for the harvest of the earth is ripe. So who sat on the cloud thrust in his sickle of the earth, and the earth was reaped. Okay, so one like the Son of Man. If I'm ready for that one or not, I'm not sure. So what is that? What do you think? Is that Christ and his judgment? Is what? Okay. Think about that one next week. Hey, I hope I didn't confuse everybody too much. Okay, I'm going to call Josh and thank him for this wonderful opportunity. But